Hi class, it's Miss Miller, and today we're going to talk about the Oedipus Framework. And the purpose of this tutorial is to provide you with some sort of context, background, or perspective that might give you some insight as you read through or navigate the text. And so we're going to start with the social and political schemes of the time. And before we do that, I do want to introduce you to the author of the play Oedipus. And his name is Sophocles. He was born in 497 BCE, perhaps one of the most famous ancient Greek playwrights of his time. And the play itself takes place in Athens, Greece. Now, in Athens, Greece, during this time frame, there was what was called an exclusive or exclusionary democracy. In a sense, it was an open assembly. Only 10% of the population was a part of this, and so perhaps just the women, the slaves, the non-citizens were not participants of this exclusive democracy. And this sort of served as the impetus for Sophocles' work. Because of the social inequities that existed in Athens, Greece, much of his work sort of illustrated the retribution that we would receive, or the people of Athens, Greece that were prejudiced or showed any sort of bias against the poor during that time. Now, another idea that might help you as you navigate through Oedipus would be the religious ideas expressed. The Greek citizens, they believed in a sense of deities, over 100 gods, not in the way in which we do today. And then if you narrow it down to the most I say relative gods would be the Olympian gods. Those are the ones who perhaps in the whole grand scheme played a bigger role, especially during his plays. And so these gods were immortal and they were flawed, not necessarily perfect in the way that we would imagine a god to be. And this would show up in even the Delphic oracle, in which you see here there's a prophet and she thinks that she has all of the answers, and even provides a prophet for Oedipus in the play, sort of determining his fate. And so, you know, some would say that there was gas leaking in where she lived, and that's why she sounded so crazy. The religious ideas also extends to this idea of free will versus fate. And this sort of transcends through the entire play. And we, as the reader, we are sort of challenged with this idea, because the Greek citizens did believe in free will, that everyone could make their own decisions and they could decide for themselves what was always best. However, fate always trumped free will. So based on your fate, if there was a prophet who said at the end of your life, this is what's going to happen, regardless of your free will, fate would take over and fate would win. And so those were some of the ideas, or religious ideas, expressed by the Greek citizens during this time. Now, I think it's also important to notice the evolution of the Greek theater. And so this is the chorus, which you will recognize in your reading of Oedipus. There's a group of people who are always singing, they're always on stage, they're always moving, and they play a significant role in the play. And in just a few minutes, we'll discuss their purpose or function. But the evolution of the Greek theater, you'll notice that what happened is in the 6th century BCE, we see this idea where acting itself was invented, because now we have one actor on stage who comes in front of the chorus and performs a solo act. And then this sort of transitions to the idea of a second actor coming on stage who interacts with the first and creates this complicated plot. Before we go, I want to just reverse back a little bit to this 5th century BC, the competition of the tragedy. There are 3 tragedies, and then there's a satire or something for some sort of comic relief, and all the plays were performed in one day. So there was some sort of a competition during this time, and we'll talk about the accolades that the author Sophocles had received as a result. And then the final idea for the evolution of the Greek theater is the idea that finally we brought on a third actor on stage. So we went from just the chorus, then one actor, then two actors, and now three. And that's where we have Oedipus Rex, and then one of my favorites, Antigone, which we will see who she is. She's actually Oedipus's daughter. And that's another play that was, even though it was written first, typically it's read afterwards. So here are the three playwrights who were always in competition. So if you could imagine, once a year, there was a big competition. It was a huge thing. Like you think about the NBA finals. This was it for the Greek citizens. The three playwrights would perform or have their plays performed. And as you can see, Sophocles, he had over 30, he always came in the first place, over 30 wins. And Aeschylus had, I believe, 13 wins, and Euripides had 4. So these playwrights would go into competition. They would have all 4 of their plays played out, and this was like a big thing for the Greek citizens. Now, the qualities of a Greek theater: 1, the actors were all men, between 15 to 20 men. They wore wigs, as you can see in this illustration. They always wore masks. Interestingly enough, they had heels on, and this wasn't for no other reason than so that the people in the audience could see them. The plays were always in the daytime, and there were very few sets and props on stage, so it was very minimal. And so the 3 Aristotle unities that you should know in terms of the qualities of the Greek theater is that there was this idea of unit of time. Everything took place in one time period, in 24 hours. Unity of place, there was just one setting in the work. And the unity of subject suggests that there was just one issue in the play, and it was centered around the main actor, or the main person in the play. There was no violence because of the religious ideas. There would always, if there was violence in the play, a messenger would come out and then communicate that verbally to the audience, but you wouldn't see any acts of violence in Greek theater. And then, of course, another element that you should know of Greek theater is the idea of dramatic irony. And that sort of suggests that the audience knows something that the people on stage do not. And so we get to watch everything unfold, and the assumption can be made that we already know of Oedipus's background. We are aware of the Oedipus complex. We even know what happens at the end, but we just sort of watch his response and reaction to all of this and see how the idea of free will and fate sort of plays out throughout the work. Now, the functions of the chorus presents the exposition and the commentary. They recall events of the past. They interpret and summarize events. So when you're reading through Oedipus and you are sort of navigating through the chorus, you have to keep in mind that the chorus is moving, and they are singing together on stage. They interpret and summarize the events. They ask questions. They offer opinions and give advice. Their job is to remain objective and to provide a moralistic decision at the end of the play. Now, there's a term in Greek theater called homos, and that's when the lead chorus, there's always one member from the chorus, you might see this in your reading, that is the individual who will sort of represent the entire chorus and speak on behalf of them, and that individual will speak with one of the actors on stage. So when you see that happening in the play, hopefully that'll make sense to you. And also, I think it's mindful that as you read through the content of the chorus, to ask yourself which one of these functions is taking place as I'm reading through the function of the chorus. And then the chorus exchange, I had to put this in. But there are three parts to the chorus and the movement. There's the strophe, which you may have been introduced to in the reading, but the chorus moves from left to right or east to west on the stage. And then the antistrophe is the chorus moves from right to left across the stage, and then the epode is the completion of the movement of the chorus. So they play a huge and significant role. And so this, similar to Shakespeare, it just has to be observed or watched. You can read it, but there's something about seeing it that has a much more impact and provides you with insight that perhaps you couldn't get necessarily by just reading it alone. And so I think it's also important to note the family tree. You do need to know the background about Laius. He committed a sin against a family member, which sort of dictated Oedipus's fate. And no matter how good Oedipus was, there was no way to avoid it. But Laius was married to Jocasta, and they were not supposed to have any children. And apparently Jocasta got Laius drunk, and they conceived Oedipus. Well, because of what Laius did, he did something with his nephew. I think he kidnapped his nephew. He took him away, and it's a huge family tree here. But I'm just going to talk to you about the context in which the play is driven. And so it was determined, or the profit for Laius is that if he had children, his son would come back and kill him. So knowing this, Laius and Jocasta were very anxious. And so when they conceived Oedipus, they dropped him off somewhere and tied him up on the ankles and left him for dead, pretty much. As far as they knew, he was dead, their own son. And so one day someone finds Oedipus and takes him and takes care of him, and he has a new family. And so as he grows up, he comes across a pitch in the road. He runs into his father, unbeknownst to him. He has no idea it's his dad. And some sort of exchange occurs, and he kills his dad, which is exactly what the fate or his fate was determined. He did not know that this was his dad. So he goes into the city. He marries this beautiful woman, Jocasta, who happens to be his mother. He has no idea. He has children with Jocasta who are both his brother now and his children. And you can see Antigone is one of his kids, and that's another play, like we had referenced before, that was written first, but produced or used afterwards. And even though this is not the three plays that he wrote, is not necessarily a trilogy, because Oedipus was written 40 years after and Antigone was, it still sort of goes together and usually used together in class. So usually you read Oedipus first and then Antigone, but Antigone was written first, and there's another Oedipus of Columbus or some sort. But anyways, so that's what it looks like. So hopefully that was helpful, provided you with some context to give you some idea about how to navigate through the text and begin your reading or continue it. Thank you.